Hey kiddo, brush your teeth? Did you get your water? Are you under your blankies now? Did you set your alarm for the morning? If you forgot any of those things, we're going to start soon, so pause the video, go do those things, and come back and start it again when you're done, okay? Alright, today we're going to start with a German folktale called Hans in Luck. Hans had served his master 7 years, and at last said to him, "Master, my time is up. I should like to go home and see my mother, so give me my wages." And the master said, "You have been a faithful and good servant, so your pay shall be handsome." Then he gave him a piece of silver that was as big as his head. Hans took out his pocket handkerchief, put the piece of silver into it, threw it over his shoulder, and jogged off homeward. As he went lazily on, dragging one foot after another, a man came in sight, trotting along gaily on a capital horse. "Ah," said Hans aloud, "what a fine thing it is to ride on horseback. There he sits as if he were at home in his chair. He trips against no stones, spares his shoes, and yet gets on he hardly knows how." The horseman heard this and said, "Well, Hans, why do you go on foot then?" "Ah," he said, "I have this load to carry, to be sure. It is silver, but it is so heavy I can't hold up my head, and it hurts my shoulder sadly." "What do you say to changing?" said the horseman. "I will give you my horse, and you shall give me the silver." "With all my heart," said Hans, "but I tell you one thing, you will have a weary task to drag it along." The horseman got off, took the silver, helped Hans up, gave him the bridle into his hand, and said, "When you want to go very fast, you must smack your lips loud and cry, 'Jip.'" Hans was delighted as he sat on the horse, and rode merrily on. After a time he thought he should like to go a little faster, so he smacked his lips and cried, "Jip!" Away went the horse full gallop, and before Hans knew what he was about, he was thrown off and lay in a ditch by the wayside, and his horse would have run off if a shepherd who was coming by driving a cow had not stopped it. Hans soon came to himself and got up upon his legs again. He was sadly vexed and said to the shepherd, "This riding is no joke. When a man gets on a beast like this, he stumbles and flings him as if it would break his neck. However, I'm off now, once and for all. I like your cow a great deal better. One can walk along at one's leisure behind her, and have milk, butter, and cheese every day into the bargain. What I would give to have such a cow." "Well," said the shepherd, "if you are so fond of her, I will change my cow for your horse." "Done," said Hans merrily. The shepherd jumped upon the horse, and away he rode. Hans drove off his cow quietly, and thought his bargain a very lucky one. "If I only have a piece of bread, and I certainly shall be able to get that, I can, whenever I like, eat my butter and cheese with it, and when I am thirsty, I can milk my cow and drink the milk. What can I wish for more?" said he. When he came to an inn, he halted, ate up all his bread, and gave away his last penny for a glass of beer. Then he drove his cow towards his mother's village. The heat grew greater as noon came on, till at last he found himself on a wide heath that it would take him more than an hour to cross, and he began to be so hot and parched his tongue cleaved to the roof of his mouth. "I can find a cure for this," thought he. "Now will I milk my cow and quench my thirst." So he tied her to the stump of a tree, and held his leathern cap to milk into, but not a drop was to be had. While he was trying his luck and managing the matter very clumsily, the uneasy beast gave him a kick on the head that knocked him down, and there he lay a long while, senseless. Luckily, a butcher came by driving a pig in a wheelbarrow. "What is the matter with you?" said the butcher as he helped him up. Hans told him what had happened, and the butcher gave him a flask, saying, "There, drink and refresh yourself. Your cow will give you no milk. She's an old beast, good for nothing but the slaughterhouse." "Alas, alas," said Hans, "who would have thought it? If I kill her, what will she be good for? I hate cow beef. It is not tender enough for me. If it were a pig now, one could do something with that. It would at any rate make some sausages." "Well," said the butcher, "to please you, I'll change, and give you the pig for the cow." "Heaven reward you for your kindness," said Hans, as he gave the butcher the cow and took the pig off the wheelbarrow and drove it off, holding it by a string tied to its leg. So on he jogged, and all seemed now to go right with him. He had met with some misfortunes, to be sure, but he was now well repaid for all. The next person he met was a countryman, carrying a fine white goose under his arm. The countryman stopped to ask what was the hour, and Hans told him all his luck, and how he had made so many good bargains. The countryman said he was going to take the goose to a christening. "Feel," said he, "how heavy it is, and yet it is only 8 weeks old. Whoever roasts and eat it may cut plenty of fat off, it has lived so well." "You're right," said Hans, as he weighed it in his hand, "but my pig is no trifle." Meantime, the countryman began to look grave and shook his head. "Hark ye, my good friend, your pig may get you into a scrape. In the village I have just come from, the squire has had a pig stolen out of his sty. I was dreadfully afraid when I saw you that you had got the squire's pig. It will be a bad job if they catch you, for the least they'll do will be to drown you in the horse pond." Poor Hans was sadly frightened. "Good man," cried Hans, "pray get me out of this scrape. You know this country better than I. Take my pig, give me the goose." "I ought to have something in the bargain," said the countryman. "However, I'll not bear hard upon you, as you are in trouble." Then he took the string in his hand and drove off the pig by a side path, while Hans went on his way homeward free from care. "After all," thought Hans, "I have the best of the bargain. First there will be a capital roast, then the fat will find me in goose grease for 6 months, and then there are all the beautiful white feathers. I will put them in my pillow, and then I am sure I shall sleep soundly without rocking. How happy my mother will be." As he came to the last village, he saw a scissors grinder with his wheel working away and singing, "O'er hill and o'er dale so happy I roam, work light and live well, all the world is my home. Who so blithe, so merry as I?" Hans stood looking for a while, and at last said, "You must be well off, Master Grinder. You seem so happy at your work." "Yes," said the other, "mine is a golden trade. A good grinder never puts his hand in his pockets without finding money in it. But where did you get that beautiful goose?" "I did not buy it, but changed for a pig." "Where did you get the pig?" "I gave a cow for it." "And the cow?" "I gave a horse for it." "And the horse?" "I got a piece of silver as big as my head for that." "And the silver?" "Oh, I worked hard for that 7 long years." "You have thriven well in the world hitherto," said the grinder. "Now if you could find money in your pocket, whenever you put your hand into it, your fortune would be made." "Very true, but how is that to be managed?" "You must turn grinder like me," said the other. "You only want a grindstone, the rest will come of itself. Here is one that is only a little worse for wear. I would not ask more than the value of your goose for it. Will you buy it?" "How can you ask such a question?" said Hans. "I should be the happiest man in the world if I could have money whenever I put my hand in my pocket. What could I want more? Here's the goose." "Now," said the grinder, as he gave him a common rough stone that lay by his side, "this is a most capital stone. Do but manage it cleverly, and you can make an old nail cut with it." Hans took the stone and went off with a light heart. His eyes sparkled with joy, and he said to himself, "I must have been born in a lucky hour. Everything I want or wish comes to me of itself." In the meantime, he began to be tired, for he had been traveling ever since daybreak. He was hungry, too, for he had given away his last penny in his joy at getting the cow. At last he could go no further, and the stone tired him terribly. So he dragged himself to the side of the pond that he might drink some water and rest a while. He laid the stone carefully by his side on the bank, but as he stooped down to drink, he forgot it, pushed it a little, and down it went, plump into the pond. For a while he watched it sinking in the clear, deep water, then sprang up for joy, and again fell upon his knees and thanked heaven with tears in his eyes for its kindness in taking away his only plague, the ugly, heavy stone. "How happy am I!" cried he. "No mortal was ever so lucky as I am." Then he got up with a light and merry heart and walked on, free from his troubles, till he reached his mother's house. The end. That was pretty silly, huh? Next, we're going to read The Water Spirit. About the middle of the 16th century, when Zundorf was no larger than it is at present, there lived at the end of the village, hard by the church, one of that useful class of women termed midwives. She was an honest, industrious creature, and what with ushering the newborn into life, and then assisting in making garments for them, she contrived to creep through the world in comfort, if not in complete happiness. The summer had been one of unusual drought, and the winter, of a necessity, one of uncommon scarcity, so that when the spring arrived, the good woman had less to do than at any period in the preceding 7 years. In fact, she was totally unemployed. As she mused one night, laying abed on the matter, she was startled by a sharp, quick knock at the door of her cottage. She hesitated for a moment to answer the call, but the knocking was repeated with more violence than before. This caused her to spring out of bed without delay, and hasten to ascertain the wish of her impatient visitor. She opened the door in the twinkling of an eye, and a man, tall of stature, enveloped in a large dark cloak, stood before her. "My wife is in need of thee," he said to her abruptly. "Her time is come. Follow me." "Nay, but the night is dark, sir," replied she. "Whither do you desire me to follow?" "Close at hand," he answered, as abruptly as before. "Be ye quick, and follow me." "I will but light my lamp and place it in the lantern," said the woman. "It will not cost me more than a moment's delay." "It needs not, repeated the stranger. "The spot is close by. I know every foot of ground. Follow. There was something so imperative, and at the same time so irresistible, in the manner of the man, that she had said not another word, but drawing her warm cloak about her head, followed him at once. Ere she was aware of the course he had taken, so dark was the night, and so wrapped up was she in the cloak. In her meditations, she found herself on the bank of the Rhine, just opposite of the low, fertile inlet which bears the same name as the village, and lies a little distance from the shore. "How is this, good sir?" she exclaimed in a tone of surprise and alarm. "You have missed the way. You've left your road. Here is no further path." "Silence, and follow," were the only words he spoke in reply, but they were uttered in such a manner as to show her at once that her best course was obedience. They were now at the edge of the mighty stream. The rushing waters washed their feet. The poor woman would fain have drawn back, but she could not, such was the preternatural power exercised over her by her companion. "Fear not, follow," he spoke again, in a kinder tone, as the current kissed the hem of her garments. He took the lead of her. The waters opened to receive him. A wall of crystal seemed built up on either side of the vista. He plunged into its depths, and she followed. The wild waves gurgled over them, and they were walking over the shiny pebbles and glittering sands which strewed the bed of the river. And now a change came over her indeed. She had left all on earth in the thick darkness of a starlit spring night, yet all around her was lighted up like a mellow harvest eve, when the sun shines refulgent through masses of golden clouds on the smiling pastures and emerald meadows of the west. She looked up, but she could see no cause for this illumination. She looked down, and her search was equally unsuccessful. She seemed to herself to traverse a great hall of surpassing transparency, lighted up by a light resembling that given out by a huge globe of ground glass. Her conductor still preceded her. They approached a little door. The chamber within it contained the object of their solicitude. On a couch of mother of pearl, surrounded by sleeping fishes and drowsy sirens, who could evidently afford her no assistance, lay the sick lady. "Here is my wife," spake the stranger as they entered the chamber. "Take her in hand at once, and hark ye, mother, heed that she has no injury through thee, or—" With these words he waved his hand, and proceeded by the obedient inhabitants of the river, who had until then occupied the chamber, and left the area. The midwife approached her patient with fear and trembling. She knew not what to anticipate. What was her surprise to perceive that the stranger was like any other lady. The business in hand was soon finished, and midwife and patient began to talk together, as women will when an opportunity is afforded them. "It surprises me much," said the midwife, "to see such a handsome young lady as you are buried down here in the bottom of the river. Do you never visit the land? What a loss it is to you!" "Hush, hush," interposed the woman, placing her forefinger significantly on her lips. "You peril your life by talking thus without guard. Go to the door. Look out that you may see if there be any listeners. Then I will tell you something to surprise you." The midwife did as she was directed. There was no living being within earshot. "Now listen," said the lady. The midwife was all ears. "I am a woman, a Christian woman like you, though I am here now in the home of my husband, who is the spirit of these mighty waters." "You must be joking," said the midwife. "My father was the lord of the hamlet of Rate, a little above Lulsdorf, and I lived there in peace and happiness during my girlish days. I had nothing to desire, as every wish was gratified by him as soon as it was formed. However, as I grew to motherhood, I felt my happiness had departed. I knew not whither it had gone, or why, but gone it was. I felt restless, melancholy, wretched. I wanted, in short, something to love, but that I found out since. Well, one day, a merrymaking took place in the village, and everyone was present at it. We danced on the green sward which stretches to the margin of the river. For that day I all at once forgot my grief. I was happy, and was among those that were the happiest. They made me the queen of the feast, and I had the homage of all. As the sun was going down in glory in the far west, melting the masses of clouds into liquid gold, a stranger of a noble mien appeared in the midst of our merry circle. He was garbed in green from head to heel, and seemed to have crossed the river, for the hem of his rich riding cloak was dripping with wet. No one knew him, no one cared to inquire who he was, and his presence rather awed than rejoiced us. He was, however, a stranger, and he was welcome. When I tell you that stranger is now my husband, you may imagine the rest. When the dance then on foot was ended, he asked my hand. I could not refuse it if I would. I would not if I could. He was irresistible. We danced and danced until the earth seemed to reel around us. I could perceive, however, even in the whirl of tumultuous delight which forced me onward, that we neared the water's edge in every successive figure. We stood at length on the verge of the stream. The current caught my dress, the villagers shrieked aloud, and rushed to rescue me from the river. "Follow," said my partner, plunging, as he spoke, into the foaming flood. I followed. Since then I have lived here, with him. It is now a century since, but he has communicated to me a portion of his own immortality, and I know not age, nor dread of death any longer. He is good and kind to me, though fearful to others. The only cause of complaint I have is his invariable custom of destroying every babe to which I give birth on the 3rd day after my delivery. He says it is not for my sake, but for their sake that he does so, and he knows best. She sighed heavily as she said this. "And now," resumed the lady, "I must give you one piece of advice, which, if you would keep your life, you must implicitly adopt. My husband will return. Be on your guard, I bid you. He will offer you gold. He will pour out countless treasures he possesses before you. He will proffer you diamonds and pearls, priceless gems. But heed well what I say to you. Take nothing more from him than you would from any other person. Take the exact sum you are wont to receive on earth, and take not a dollar more, or your life is not worth a moment's purchase. It is forfeit." "He must be a cruel being indeed," said the midwife. "God deliver you from this dread and great danger." "See you yon sealed vessels?" spake the lady, without seeming to heed her fright or hear her words. The midwife looked and saw ranged on the upper shelf of the apartment about a dozen small pots, like pipkins, all fast sealed and labeled in unknown characters. These pots, she continued, contain the souls of those who have been, like you, my attendants in childbirth, but who, for slighting the advice I gave them, as I now give you, and permitting a spirit of unjust gain to take possession of their hearts, were deprived of life by my husband. Heed well what I say. He comes, be silent and discreet. As she spake, the water spirit entered. He first asked his wife how she did, and his tones were like the rushing sound of a current heard far off. Learning from her own lips that all was well with her, he turned to the midwife and thanked her most graciously. Now come with me, he said. I must pay thee for thy services. She followed him from the sick chamber to the treasury of the palace. It was a spacious crystal vault lighted up like the rest of the palace, from without, but within it was resplendent with treasures of all kinds. He led her to a huge heap of shining gold, which ran the whole length of the chamber. Here, said he, take what you will, I put no stint upon you. The trembling woman picked up a single piece of the smallest coin she could find upon the heap. This is my fee, she spake. I ask no more than a fair remuneration for my labor. The water spirit's brow blackened with a tempestuous night, and he showed his green teeth for a moment as if in great ire. But the feeling, whatever it was, appeared to pass away as quickly as it came, and he led her to a huge heap of pearls. Here, he said, take what you will. Perhaps you like these better. They are all pearls of great price, or may be you would wish for some memento of me. Take what you will. But she still declined to take anything more, although he tempted her with all of his treasures. She had not forgotten the advice of her patient. I desire nothing more from you, great prince as you are, than I receive from one of my own condition. This was her uniform answer to his entreaties. I thank you, but I may not take aught beside my due. If, said he, after a short pause, you had taken more than your due, you would have perished at my hands. And now you shall go home. But first take this. Fear not. As he spake, he dipped his hand in the heap of gold and poured forth a handful into her lap. Use that, he continued. Use it without fear. It is my gift. No evil will come of it. I give you my royal word. He beckoned her onward without waiting for her reply, and they were walking once again through the corridors of the palace. Adieu, he said, waving his hand to her. Adieu. The darkness fell around her in a moment. In a moment more, she awoke, as from a dream, in her warm bed. The end. All right, that's enough. Get some rest. Make sure you get enough for the morning. Make sure you have enough so that you can focus. Sweet dreams. Take care of yourself, okay? Good night.